Love will guide us. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Columbus. We're an inclusive spiritual community of people who support each other in their quest for truth and meaning. I'm Connie Ussery, retired librarian and your volunteer service leader this morning. We start our services every Sunday by lighting the chalice, which symbolizes reason, tolerance, and freedom, and also respect, compassion, and love. I hope everyone has been able to join us this morning with no technical glitches. David Rush will give some Zoom instructions on how to take advantage of some of the features that will help us communicate through this service.
All right. We are recording this service, which we'll post on YouTube later. If you don't want your lovely face appearing on the screen, you can click on the stop video, still see your name, but won't see your face. And of course, we suggest you subscribe to our YouTube channel, of course. There is a chat feature for the joys and concerns and the Q&A, which will be after the closing hymn. You can speak. We kind of request you to maybe hold your hand up so everyone doesn't try to talk at the same time. Or if you type something into the chat feature, one of us will relay that on to the speaker. Back to you, Connie.
Oh, we have the following announcements for you this morning. If you're not receiving regular emails from the fellowship, be sure and let Brenda know, our office administrator. But first check your promotions folder or your spam folder to make sure they're not going there. Now it's more important than ever that we maintain communication, and email is our way to keep you informed. You should have received a very important email recently. This was sent to you on November 20th, and it's our e-ballot so that we can elect our new board of directors. We're electing a president, a secretary, treasurer, and our members at large. So please, if you haven't gotten that e-ballot, let Brenda know at uufcga@gmail.com. Next week's program is by Rick Spradlin. What can Buddhism and science teach us about the universe? We have a collection box on the front porch at the UU Fellowship Building, and it's to collect blankets and clothing for the homeless. We're also collecting money for Feeding the Valley. If you want to make a donation for Feeding the Valley, please designate that donation as different from your regular donation to the fellowship itself. And you can send that check or any donations to PayPal. Just be sure you fill in uufcga@gmail.com as the recipient, or you can mail a check to our church address. P.O. Box 698, Fortson, Georgia, 31808. Now let's affirm our 7 principles that sum up the core values of Unitarian Universalism. Number 1, the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Number 2, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. Number 3, acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations. Number 4, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. Number 5, the right of conscience and the use of the democratic processes in our congregations and in our society at large. And this is so important right now. We have a chance to elect a new board of directors. Even though we're not meeting in person every Sunday, that board of directors is meeting every month to deal with issues that address how we will eventually get to meet in person again. And I hope that'll be soon. Also, we have the January 5th state race in Georgia for 2 Senate seats. So be sure that you're doing everything you can to participate in those 2 very important elections coming up for UUFC and for our national, state and national government. Number 6, the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. Number 7, respect for the interdependent web of all existence, of which we all are a part. And now, joys and concerns. One of the ways we proclaim the vitality of our fellowship is through sharing our brief and personal joys and concerns. It's a time to share what's important in our own lives. I'll start by lighting a candle for joys or for sorrows, rather, or concerns you might not want to share in public. And I'd like to light another candle for people in our state and in our nation who are suffering from COVID as we speak during this tremendous spike in cases, deaths, and hospitalizations. Are there further joys and concerns to mention, David or Elise?
I have a joy, Elise Leonard. My son has informed me that he got a promotion and a salary bump, and I'm very proud of him for he got his promotion for the work that he's doing. They said it's on par with the other scientists that have their doctorate, so they gave him that bump. So I'm proud of him. Thank you. Any other joys, concerns?
We have one from Barbara Owens to keep her in our thoughts as she faces some serious issues in her life.
Oh, Bill has a joy. Would you like to share your joy, Bill? You have to unmute.
I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes.
My joy is all the opportunities that I've had to stay in touch remotely with our friends in UU, and it seems like it's a lot of work, but in actuality, it's a lot of fun, and it's especially been fun working with Ron and Connie on this presentation. I'm really looking forward to their talk.
Thank you. And it's a joy for us to be able to do this from our home. We love the fellowship hall, but to stay safe and be careful is so important right now. And so I'm amazed that we're able to do this with all your hard work, Bill and David and Kenny and everyone else who works, Ron, to make all this happen. So we continue with the celebration of life toast, which kind of reminds me of another joy. Ed Wilson wrote this toast. He helps keep the energy flowing in this congregation, and we all appreciate him so much. So this is unique to our fellowship, but we do it a little differently on Zoom. You can join in with your cup of coffee or with your other beverages. Our toast carries no doctrinal symbolism. It's not a sacrament. It's just a warm tradition that we've been doing for years, and we invite you to join in with us today. So lift your cups. I'll read the toast, and we'll all join together in the last line. We celebrate life with its beauty and its pain. We lift these cups in tribute to the achievements of human minds and hands, and in sensitivity to the frustrations of misfortune and heartache. Not fixing blame or credit for the outcome of chance, sensing the risk, savoring the joy, sharing it all, knowing of the certainty of death, and remembering the value of each moment. We drink our toast of celebration to this time, to the future, to each other, to the throbbing of the earth and sea and sky with life. Together, we drink this toast in celebration of life. This morning's offering will now be given and received in the spirit of grateful fellowship. You can mail offerings to UUFC at P.O. Box 698, Fortson, Georgia, 31808. That address is also on our website. Or you can use PayPal. Hit send money and put uufcga@gmail.com in the blank as a recipient. So while you look for your checkbook or as you sign into PayPal, Whittaker will play Beethoven's Bagatelle in D major for us. Thank you, Whittaker. So now Ron and I are your guest speakers for this morning. Ron, like me, is a retired library media specialist, but he started out his career as a journalist as a sports writer at LaGrange Daily News, and then as editor of America's Textile International magazine. And then he was the vice president at Synovus Retirement Plan Services before he became a librarian at Brookstone. So thank you, Ron. He's going to start with a reading.
For our reading today, I found a column written by a Philadelphia Inquirer columnist, published back in late March. So I have some excerpts from that column. He wrote, "Call them mantras, maxims, or even memes. They get repeated and recycled over the years, sometimes over the millennia, because they contain powerful jolts of easily accessible truth, insight, and perspective. I turned to my collection of positive aphorisms this week as we all face new struggles, looking for wisdom from the past to help the present. I quote humorist Irma Bombeck, who wrote, "Worry is like a rocking chair. It gives you something to do, but never gets you anywhere." Now is the time for a more scientific and analytical approach. The physicist Marie Curie said, "Nothing in life is to be feared. It is only to be understood. Now is the time to understand more so that we may fear less." For those of us that were alive in 1988, Bobby McFerrin's "Don't Worry, Be Happy" has been stuck in our heads ever since. There have been many happiness songs before and since, but McFerrin's Grammy-winning tune has had the longest staying power because it's simple and directive. Personally, I prefer Bob Marley's "Don't Worry About a Thing, because every little thing's gonna be all right." Also directive, plus a call to appreciate the little things, like sunrises and bird songs. Then there is the quote from actress Marla Gibbs, who said, "Things could always be better, but things could always be worse." Marla Gibbs, if you don't remember, was famous for her role as a sassy but insightful housekeeper in the 70s sitcom The Jeffersons. I equally like this framing by Fred Rogers. Often when you think you're at the end of something, you're at the beginning of something else. It speaks to this time as the start of a new era without any negative connotation. We need to make the best with what we have now, especially if the grocery store shelves are empty. You can't always get what you want, but if you try sometimes, you get what you need, sang the Rolling Stones. And what you need are the bare necessities. The simple bare necessities. Forget about your worries and your strife. The bare necessities of life will come to you, promises Baloo the bear in Disney's The Jungle Book. Embrace that this time can have a positive impact on you. That which does not kill you makes us stronger, the aphoristic philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche famously said. We should keep hope, maybe even help us see dawn comes after the darkness, as author Lisa Wingate put it. That's the perspective articulated at the end of the hope-fueled film Castaway. After 4 years stuck on an island and uncertain of what to do once he returns home, Tom Hanks' character says, I know what I have to do now. I've got to keep breathing because tomorrow the sun will rise. Who knows what the tide could bring? In the end, I'm going to give the last word to that singer sage John Lennon. If you only remember one of these aphorisms, this is the one that most succinctly captures endurance, perspective, and hope. Lennon wrote, everything will be okay in the end. If it's not okay, it's not the end. And now our program. Good morning. We are delighted to be able to present to you our COVID journey and your support. This service is our message of gratitude for this UU fellowship and your kindness you've shown throughout our isolation, and gratitude for the amazing opportunity to participate in local medical trials that may make our greater community safer.
Though our experience relates to all 7 of the UU principles, the 6th seems to sum up our journey, the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. But the 7th principle sums up a bigger lesson of how everything affects everything else, from the foods we consume to the illnesses we suffer and the global village we're all a part of, whether we acknowledge that or not. Now more than ever, the world is flat, and we are part of the interdependent web of life.
I know of no better illustration than that worldwide connected interdependent web of life than a global pandemic. We experience world community beginning with you and reaching out from there. All this begins with the words written on the wall in Grace Fellowship Hall above our podium: reason, tolerance, and freedom. Michelle had suggested some time back that we add the word compassion, and I realize now that she has a really good point.
Reason guides our thoughts, who we can learn to trust, and in the case of disease, we have to assume that reason directs the science of research, and it directs the institutions who guide that research. Reason's proven again and again that science finds solutions when people justly demand them.
We've been practicing tolerance as much as possible. We know that many people believe this virus is a hoax, and unfortunately, we all understand how much politics has gotten embedded into this whole virus situation. Well, those people have a right to their beliefs, as long as those beliefs don't endanger others. This is where practicing tolerance can get sketchy.
The third word above our podium is freedom. Somehow that word gets tricky too through all this. Freedom to choose, freedom to act, and freedom to believe.
But if we added that fourth word, compassion, there could be no confusion. Compassion is the same for all people in all situations. If compassion guides our actions and our choices, then it shapes our beliefs.
Ron and I have been growing together in our beliefs ever since we met 30 years ago, and we're so glad that our journey has led us to you. At first we went through a phase of trying to outdo each other in feats of daring.
We gave a program back in the old building on Double Churches Road some time back on adrenaline junkies. And our motto used to be, when we were a good bit younger, that a vacation is not successful unless our survival has been in question at least once. I don't think we feel exactly that way anymore. But we've had great experiences hiking in bear country, scuba diving with sharks. 20, 30 years ago, we weren't quite as aware of our mortality as we are now. The leaders of the Outdoor Therapeutic Program, OTP, for troubled teens, where I served on the board of directors for years, had taught me about how perceived risks and the interaction of perceived risks and real risks serves a real purpose in bonding people together so that you can depend on others when real fears and dangers arise. Connie and I were testing ourselves and building trust.
And we have built trust with you as well. Our fellowship has a lot of fun together, and that's another bonding experience that we really enjoy with UU of Columbus. We join you with laughter, with singing, with pitching in on big projects. We have that bond of fellowship, and it's fun to choose challenges that we get to participate in together and learn to trust. But disease is really different. We don't get to choose that challenge. We were born in time to benefit from so many vaccines and scientific advancements. We don't fear polio like people did decades ago. We don't fear smallpox, and we don't live in fear of childhood diseases for our children.
So to me, the three keys for our having survived our COVID ordeal as successfully as we have are, number one, technology. I mean, we were fortunate enough to be able to get the same treatment 3 or 4 miles from our house that President Trump got at Walter Reed. You know, how many of us saw that Trump's incredibly privileged treatment when he got COVID is something that would be unattainable to us? Well, the downside, of course, Trump was not in danger of getting a placebo. And we found out that we only had a 33% chance in this particular clinical trial of getting a placebo. And we think we probably didn't get the placebo. So the first plus on our side was technology, medical technology. The second plus was support from you, a major part of this presentation today. And the third thing, I think, was being relatively well prepared in terms of being in pretty good physical and emotional shape coming into it. So beyond each other to depend on, we have a community to rely on right here at UU Fellowship.
And you have a lot to do with our emotional shape. Ron and I have been on the survival side of COVID-19 for about a month now. It's transformed us in several ways. Before we got the virus, we lived in fear of it. We lived in self-imposed quarantine most of the time, and we only got out when we had to. And when we did, we wore masks, and we were very careful. We stepped away from people.
Many of you called to inquire as to how we were doing and express your concern and ask how you could help. I remember Hal and Michelle called sometimes a couple times a day, and Hal kept wondering why I wasn't sicker. I kept telling him that, gee, I had a runny nose for a couple of days. I had a very low fever, but that this really hasn't been much of an illness for me personally. And Hal said, well, be careful, be respectful, particularly when we talked about doing this presentation. Be respectful of the tremendous pain and suffering that many people have gone through who've had much worse time than we have. One person who's gone through this that we communicated with is Carol Taylor, a children's author and a friend who wrote about this fear of the disease in a post back in July about her own COVID experience and her fear and anger as a dedicated Christian, dealing with the others around her.
Carol said that she had tried to be vigilant and practice social distancing. She wore a mask everywhere she went. Why? Because I respect other people, she said, and I practice biblical teaching from John 15:17, which is love one another. She went on to explain that wearing a mask and practicing social distancing was part of her practice of loving her community and supporting it. And we have found that practice consistent with all of our fellowship.
Connie and I had shared Carol's sense of community responsibility, just as you all have. This experience has forced us all to examine our role in the community as people not only responsible for our own health, but also for the health around us, those we cherish, and the greater population whom we don't even know. This reminds me of the board, the UU board, early on had some, I wouldn't say heated discussion, but we had some spirited discussion about our reopening plan. We had that first bump back in the early spring, and some of us on the board, me included, were leaned more toward the notion of opening early and letting individuals make up their mind about whether to come to services or not. But fortunately, as I look back on it, now that we're on a third rapid and most rapid rise in this disease, wiser heads prevailed, and we took a much more patient chance, much more patient outlook or strategy toward our reopening, which was a very good thing. As we stand here today in mid-November, we are keenly aware that the official numbers show that over 250,000, over 250,000 people in the U.S. have died of COVID-19 this year. The Economist magazine says that number is undercounted and it's closer to 300,000.
So we feel truly blessed that we came through it without, hopefully, any serious consequences. Well, despite all these preparations and all these precautions and all this community responsibility, Connie became infected first.
On October 8th, I made an appointment because I was coughing. Made that appointment at 5 o'clock in the morning online, and at 11 I walked into the clinic, and by noon I was diagnosed with COVID. And I was shocked. I didn't know how I could have possibly contracted it. It took a lot of thinking to trace back to a meeting I'd attended 3 days earlier. That's possibly where it came from, but my big concern then was how I was going to protect Ron from catching it while we were living together in the same house, and I feared mostly that it might already be too late.
Connie called me at noon that Thursday as she walked away from the clinic with her positive test results, and I called the same clinic to be treated as soon as possible. At about 6 p.m. that evening, I got a negative report. The disease was not showing up in my nasal swab.
I called Michelle because I was concerned about her since we'd seen each other, though very far apart, the day before I got this diagnosis. And she assured me that she was all right. And already the fear was starting to fade away a little. I was becoming a little more reassured that maybe things were going to be okay, just from talking to her.
So Connie was diagnosed positive on a Thursday. The preceding Sunday, we had an outdoor service in the parking lot at UU. One that we thought would be the first of several. But then Hal called us later that night. I was scheduled to be the speaker at church the following Sunday. Hal called us later that night, and we discussed the details for a message to the fellowship, which he sent to Brenda to go out the very next morning. We all wanted to share the notion that it's possible, even though we felt unlikely, that those of you who came to that Sunday meeting could potentially have been exposed to the disease through us.
Then you responded. Flowers were delivered to our front door. Food was brought to us here at our home. You called, you texted us, you emailed us, and we started to feel more and more like we were coming out of the fear, coming out of the isolation, as best we could, as best you could help us.
So there is a sense of guilt to getting COVID-19, particularly when you look back on the timeline and you think, gee, we're not exactly sure when we were exposed, so it's possible we exposed others. We now think, with the benefit of hindsight, that the exposure occurred on a Monday following the Sunday service. But we weren't sure, and we still aren't 100% positive. But you started our journey back to strength and hope. You gave us the gift of all you knew about treatments and all you knew about coping, and you gave us a community of support, asking over and over, is there anything at all I can do?
Those beautiful flowers stayed here in our family room. They reminded us of you every day. The soup you brought was so helpful, and the sandwich foods, we didn't have to worry about our basic needs. We could think about what we needed to do to recover and to make sure that what happened to us didn't happen to anybody else if we could help it.
So at this point, Connie was diagnosed positive. I was still showing up negative. So we put a little distance. She moved into a guest room on the other side of the house. And we of course, we both wore masks even in the house. We went from fear to focus to outreach and science. I had been reading a few days earlier in the local newspaper of the IACT, formerly Columbus Regional Research Institute, which is a building at 800 Talbotton Road in front of what we all refer to as the medical center, now Piedmont Hospital. And in his article, it was mentioned that IACT was actively seeking people to join several clinical trials. They run dozens of clinical trials all the time. I mean, who knew? I didn't know until reading this article just a few days before I would need that knowledge very, very acutely. And I learned in the article that they were seeking people who are COVID-19 positive to enter a therapeutic trial, which is the one we ultimately got into, which, by the way, was trying a trial of the Regeneron therapeutic, which is the exact same thing that President Trump received at Walter Reed Army Hospital. Of course, he didn't have the worry of getting a placebo, but we learned that the placebo is in this case only a 33% probability. and we had a much better chance of getting an actual dose of the real therapeutic. So this we were interested in inquiring about this monoclonal antibody study for Connie, and when we went to the clinic, I called and we were seen on October 12th, the Monday, and there they said that, well, Connie, since she tested positive, they said they would reconfirm the positive test, which they did with a rapid test. They would get her into this monoclonal antibody study through Regeneron. And they also said that they'll test me, and if I'm negative, they'll offer me the chance to get into a vaccine trial. As it turned out, the rapid test administered to me that Monday morning at IECT turned out to be positive. So I tested positive there at IECT, and 30 minutes later, this was 4 days after Connie tested positive, and 30 minutes later, Connie and I were both seated actually lying down in adjoining rooms at IECT, hooked to an IV, receiving this priceless treatment as a therapeutic.
I kept a detailed journal of that experience for 30 days. I sent that to Bill Harlan, so it's now available on the website, UUFC website, if anybody wants to see it. It describes the research we found most helpful in reassuring us that this antibody treatment was safe and in final phases of study to be released to the public. And it also includes a lot of the treatments that you suggested, things that we hadn't thought about that were associated with the disease. So some of the symptoms were mitigated by a lot of your suggestions. I had a harder time with the disease than Ron did, but I had it probably 4 days when we walked into the clinic on the 12th, maybe 5 days. The limit was 7 days to join the treatment, and I was right on the cusp of that opportunity, and I still think that they helped me a lot. If no other reason, just having clinical attention every other day as we went through this study with IACT. And you energized us through all of it. You were in touch with us. We were sharing our experiences, and you made us feel like what we were doing was important and to you and to the greater community at large.
Our clinical technician at IECT, Cassandra turns out to be the daughter-in-law of a friend of Connie's, someone in the school system. Cassandra personally managed our treatment, and it was great working with her. She had us laughing and coming to understand her philosophy about the study she's managing. She'd be careful not to hurt us with all the needles and the nose swabs that this study would require. She would call in the PA immediately if any symptom warranted medical attention. We could call her if anything needed attention between our visits to the clinic, which were every other day. They welcomed us into the clinic and called us medical heroes. Our disease now gave us a purpose to help in the work to keep anyone else from having it, or at least from getting terribly sick from it.
And Cassandra was true to her word, as was Jada and James and Lisa and all the others who worked with us as we came through the doors there at the clinic. She talked about some of the study participants who came in with fear and with worse symptoms perhaps than mine. And she said sometimes after that IV treatment, some would walk out with just renewed energy and confidence that they were going to get well and already feeling better. And she said sometimes this happened on their second visit as they were coming back to talk about, how things were changing. And sometimes it took a little longer. But she was really proud of everything that she was doing there in the clinic, and her face just lit up when she was talking about it. And her enthusiasm and energy in that clinic was contagious for us, and we were grateful for that. So we were looking for transformation in our health, but certainly it happened in our attitudes as we worked with these clinicians.
Cassandra told us that it breaks her heart to know that some people in the study who need help get the placebo instead. She wants to bring those patients, she said, back, those patients who have no improvement, for another trial, but of course that's impossible. That's not the way a double-blind clinical trial works. Part of the bargain is that you sign up for it, whether you get the real treatment or the placebo. As subjects of the study, we want to support medical research for the greater good. We have to take what we are given and see it to the end.
Over the next 30 days, we logged our symptoms and the severity of those symptoms in an online app. We went to the clinic every other day for 2 weeks for COVID testing, and I mean the long swab COVID testing, and we kind of got used to that, oddly enough. We had 4 different blood sampling events where they took a lot of blood from our arms. But the outing, just having to make this trip every other day, it turned out to be a great thing that we looked forward to. You know, we started feeling like we were part of the world again, and talking about the flowers that were along the side of the road, driving under tree tunnels, and it turned into a wonderful experience for every time we went for a visit. And gradually, I don't know if it was just feeling better or getting out on these visits to the clinic, but I started feeling better, having more energy, and getting out and walking the dogs again. And again, you helped us through all of that, and we were so thrilled to be able to share that with you. And your encouragement helped us a lot through it.
You know, somehow I think knowing that we finally had this disease that we had feared so much and had tried so hard to avoid, that we were, to some respects, free from it. People that we passed in our car on our frequent outings to the clinic, we felt like we wished they all knew that there is real help right here in Columbus, Georgia. You can overcome your fear. Not that you should take risks, particularly for others, but you can know that the doctors and hospitals right here in our hometown are driving therapies that will benefit us all.
And no matter how politicized things get, we have right here at UU Fellowship a faith that can strengthen us in hope and help us overcome fear. Our fellowship can be assured that science is driving toward real results. We know that doctors are here to help us. We face a challenge now that we didn't choose, but that helps us trust each other. We can find freedom and hope.
Connie mentioned all the help we got from a lot of people about their research and suggestions that the things that we could do to make our illness less severe and shorter. Kleenex, please. Excuse me. Among those things, Connie did mention that we posted her journal on the UU website. But a couple of things that you'll find if you care to look at that journal is that we began taking mega doses of zinc. Which form of zinc? Zinc
Sulfate.
Zinc sulfate. We took 200 milligrams of zinc sulfate a day. We also took vitamins B, C, and D, and we just learned how to manage a lot of those things with a lot of help from you. So with your help and encouragement through this ordeal, I was able to vote, to participate in the climate change lobby, to meet via Zoom with the board, the UU board, to join group discussions, and to follow Sunday services. You continue to invite us back again since we were released from isolation a month ago.
And again, I kept that detailed journal, and I've shared this with anybody who wants to see what worked for us or what we might have worked for us. We really don't know, but we feel like it really did.
I think we didn't mention in these remarks, even though it's in the journal, that IACT actually paid us quite handsomely to participate in the study. When we first learned that we'd be receiving over $3,000 a piece throughout the study, the month-long study, we felt, gee, they should spend that money on where it needs to be spent. We don't need to be paid to be a part of this study and potentially receive this priceless therapeutic drug. But then we understood, as we got into the study, why they pay people. The first visit, you get all the therapeutic you're going to get. Within 2 hours after walking in their door, I had already received Regeneron treatment. So even though we had an incentive to keep going back for a month to help other people, we recognized that, gee, there's a lot of nose swabbing and there's a lot of bloodletting that takes place the next month. in order to serve as an encouragement to keep you coming back for the full month, they do pay you each time you walk in the door, which was nice to have. So we didn't face this alone like so many did in the beginning of the pandemic. We faced it and we survived it with you and with the scientists and the clinical staff who made us feel like heroes for letting them help us.
Gene Pupke of the UU Church of Richmond said, difficult times handled well will make us wiser. Maybe after weeks of fatigue and concern about every symptom, we can relax and enjoy everything with a new richness. The wisdom we've gained is a greater sense of community and our part in it.
This crisis in our lives turned into peace of mind that you helped us reach. It's put energy into our everyday existence that is hard to explain in this week of Thanksgiving. We just can't thank you enough. We'll be answering any questions and joining in the discussion very shortly here.
Let me remind you once more, after Whittaker's final hymn, we'll have a Q&A and Zoom social time, so stay tuned. We extinguish the chalice here that it might grow gently in our hearts. May it light your path as we end this service. And now for the closing words. Would everyone please rise in body or spirit for the closing words? With unity of spirit, we go our ways in universal fellowship until we meet again. And now Whittaker will play us home to the next part of our service with the hymn 108, My Life Flows On in Endless Song.